Hello and welcome to my channel Florist Patch. Today I'm going to tell you about the word hue because this is a question that I am asked quite often when I do courses, is what does hue mean in a paint name? First let's go to a straightforward dictionary definition. Hue just means color. The blue hue of the sky is just the blue color of the sky. So what does it mean in a paint name? It just means that it is the same color but with a different pigment. For example, instead of a paint being the original alizarin crimson, it is instead alizarin crimson hue. And why would they do this? Because the old pigment has a famous name and people are familiar with it, but it's not a good pigment. It's fugitive. It will fade in light when exposed to light. So manufacturers want to replace the original alizarin crimson, but they want to keep the name. Because if they just give the name of the new pigment, artists won't know what the paint manufacturer is talking about. They want their alizarin name because they know what color that is. So the manufacturers keep the alizarin crimson in the name and they add hue at the end of it to indicate that it is the color of alizarin crimson, but it is no longer the real alizarin crimson. It is now an up-to-date pigment that will perform better. Another reason to replace a real pigment with a hue is if the original one is expensive and you want to produce a cheap range of paints. For example, the cadmiums. Cadmiums are very expensive pigments, and when manufacturers want to produce some artist range, they can't use the real thing because it would cost too much. So they will pick pigments that will be similar in hue, but that will be cheaper to produce. In this case, hue just means fake. So is it a bad thing? Not necessarily. If the original pigment is bad, then there is a good chance the hue pigment will be better, because why go to all the trouble to find a similar color and replace something to produce something equally bad? The hue color is usually a better, modern alternative to an obsolete pigment, as is the case for alizarin crimson, gamboge hue and vermilion hue, for example. It is going to be interesting to see what happens to gamboge hue because the pigment used in gamboge hue, also called new gamboge, to replace the original gamboge has been discontinued. So now they need to replace gamboge hue with something else. Are they going to call it gamboge hue hue? Sometimes it can be a bad thing if the substitution is done because of cost. In that case, the manufacturer is going to try to find a cheaper pigment, and if they're trying to cut their costs, they might not pick the best one. But even then, it's not that clear-cut. It might be a good thing according to some people and a bad thing according to others. A good example is cadmium. Some artists love cadmium pigment, so replacing them with a hue, as in cadmium red hue, is not going to be popular with them. Other artists, like me, think that cadmium pigments are just too environmentally unfriendly and too toxic, and it makes them obsolete, especially as there are now some alternatives available. So to me, cadmium red hue is better than cadmium red, in a sort of the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of logic. To recap, hue means color, so in a paint name, it just means the color of a pigment without being the actual pigment. In case of an obsolete pigment, it is a good thing as the new version is likely to be better than the original. In case of cost saving, it depends what you think of the original and also what pigment is chosen for the new version. In conclusion, I would say always check the pigments in your paint, but then I would say that anyway because I kind of always say that anyway. For all the tubes I've got written all pigments are in there, same on the pans. If you're not sure about a hue in your palette, you can use the comments underneath the video in the box below and I will answer your questions. And if there is a particular hue that you enjoy or one that you particularly dislike, you can write that into the comments as well and share your experience with the rest of us. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon on my channel. Thank you, bye!